Grow up believing that we must control everything for life to go the way we want. That if we just try hard enough, stay smart enough, and push long enough, then all the doors will open. But the older we get, the more we realize that some things move farther, the more we chase them. And the tighter we grip, the faster they slip through our hands. Strangely, it's often in the moment when we are exhausted, when we finally stop resisting, when we simply pause and breathe deeply, that the very thing we've been longing for begins to come toward us. Letting go isn't failure, and it's not giving up. It's a quiet act of deep trust from a soul that's carried enough weight to understand that rivers don't need to be pushed, they need to be trusted to find their way. When you stop demanding that life move by your timeline, you begin to hear, to notice, and to live from within, instead of constantly reacting to everything around you. And from that space of surrender, of presence, peace finds you, clarity returns, and doors that once seemed closed begin to open. Not through force, but through alignment. This isn't a philosophy for passivity. It's a way of moving forward without carrying the weight of fear, anxiety, or control. This is the magic of surrender. And if you've ever felt like you've done everything right and still can't reach what you're chasing, maybe what you need right now isn't another step forward. It's one quiet step back. A pause to let go, to trust the flow, and to finally receive life, not by force, but by grace. In this video, we'll walk together into that space, where stoic calm meets radical trust, where letting go becomes your greatest strength. If you've ever felt stuck, worn out, or quietly desperate to make something happen, this is your moment. Stay with me. And if you find yourself in these words, consider subscribing and sharing your story below. You're not alone in this. You never were. 1. When you stop pushing, life starts moving. There's a moment we all come to, quietly, often in exhaustion, when we begin to question the very way we've been taught to chase our dreams. We push, we grind, we force outcomes into shape, believing that effort alone will bend life to our will. And yet, the tighter we hold on, the more things seem to resist. It's not that the goal is wrong. It's not that we are unworthy. It's that pressure creates resistance, and resistance creates friction. Somewhere along the way, we mistake control for progress, force for power, and constant motion for clarity. But clarity doesn't come through noise. It comes through presence, through stillness, through surrender. When you stop pushing, something unexpected begins to happen. The noise in your head settles. The desperation that once clouded your judgment lifts. And in its place, something softer appears. Space. Space for things to breathe, to move, to come toward you without being chased. You begin to notice opportunities that were invisible when you were too busy running. Conversations feel lighter. Decisions become simpler, and the weight you've been carrying, trying to force something to happen, starts to slip away. That's not passivity. That's alignment. Alignment is where life actually flows. There was a time when I clung tightly to a project that meant everything to me. I'd poured months into it. Draft after draft, long hours, little rest. I told myself I was being disciplined, focused, and committed. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if I didn't hold on with both hands, it would fall apart. And so I began to force it. Every sentence, every step, every interaction. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't even step back. But the more I pushed, the more blocked it became. Nothing moved. Not in me, not in the work. And eventually it wasn't discipline anymore. It was desperation wearing a mask. So I stopped. I let it sit. I stepped back, not in defeat, but in quiet honesty. I gave myself permission to release control, to stop demanding results, and to allow space for the work to speak for itself. A week later, I sat down without a plan, without tension, and wrote with more clarity and flow than I had in months. What I thought required force had only been waiting for freedom. That is the power of letting go, not as a tactic, but as a way of being. In Stoic philosophy, control is never the goal. What matters is how we respond to what we cannot control. Epictetus reminds us that freedom lies in understanding the difference between what belongs to us and what doesn't. Forcing outcomes rarely brings peace, it only tightens the knot. But when we surrender, not out of weakness but with full awareness, we begin to move with life, not against it. That shift doesn't make us less driven, it makes us more grounded. We stop trying to chase a future version of ourselves and begin to align with the person we are now. And from that place, we act, not to fix, not to force, but to contribute. Letting go doesn't mean giving up on your goals. It means you stop believing that pressure is the price of progress. It means you no longer let your worth hang on outcomes. It means you walk with the quiet confidence of someone who trusts the timing of their life. There's a deep difference between chasing and attracting. One is fueled by fear, the other by clarity. And clarity always comes when you stop shouting and start listening. You might be holding on to something right now, an idea, a dream, a relationship that you believe must happen a certain way. Maybe it's a job you think will validate you. Maybe it's a person you're trying to prove something to. Maybe it's a version of success that no longer fits, but you keep chasing it because you're afraid of who you'll be without it. Ask yourself, is it movement or is it noise? Is it growth or is it resistance? The answers don't come by pushing harder. They come by being still enough to hear what your life has been trying to tell you. What you let go of doesn't always leave you. Sometimes it finds its way back to you, but softer, truer, clearer. And sometimes letting go is the only way it ever had a chance to become real. That's not failure. That's trust. And trust is the foundation of all true power. Not because it guarantees results, but because it changes who you are while you wait. When you stop pushing, you make space for life to come toward you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally became someone who could receive it. 2. Letting go is not losing. It's trusting life's timing. Letting go doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've stopped trying to outrun the rhythm of your own life. And in a world that worships control and demands instant results, choosing to release is one of the bravest things you can do. Because it's not about giving up. It's about giving in, not to defeat, but to a deeper kind of wisdom, that what is meant for you will not miss you, and what misses you was never truly meant to stay. There's a quiet defiance in that kind of trust. Not loud, not performative, just steady, like the tide. A friend of mine, Daniel, once walked through something I never forgot. He was in his mid-30s, deeply invested in a startup he had helped build from scratch. Years of work, countless nights. It was supposed to be his breakthrough, the thing that would secure his future. But when a merger fell through and the investors pulled out, everything collapsed. I remember expecting him to fall apart, to spiral into frustration or regret, but he didn't. He grieved, yes, but not with resistance. He didn't curse life or question the timing. Instead, he said one sentence that has stayed with me ever since. Maybe it wasn't supposed to happen yet. No bitterness. Just breathe. In that silence, I saw something I hadn't yet understood. Daniel wasn't passively waiting for life to fix itself. He was choosing not to interfere with a process he couldn't rush. He understood something I was still learning. That control is often the enemy of alignment. When we push for outcomes before their time, we don't accelerate them, we distort them. And the more we try to bend time to our will, the more we forget that time, too, has its own wisdom. There are things in life that won't bloom no matter how hard you try to force them open. They need stillness, they need space, they need you to stop trying to rip them into being. Stoic philosophy teaches us to distinguish what we can control from what we can't, and the passage of time is never ours to hold. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about nature's pace, how it doesn't hurry, yet everything unfolds as it should. There's something profoundly grounding in that. Because when you truly trust the timing of your life, you stop comparing your path to others. You stop demanding that your success arrives on someone else's schedule. You begin to see your own pace not as a flaw, but as a fingerprint. Unique, unrushed, unshakable. Daniel didn't disappear into stillness. He simply stopped running ahead of his own life. In the months that followed, he began teaching part-time. Not to replace his ambition, but to reconnect with his values. He met people, he slowed down. One day, almost a year later, he was invited to consult for a startup in the same space. Except this time, the team aligned. The vision clicked, and the timing felt right. Not forced, not manufactured, just ready. That experience didn't just change him. It changed how I viewed surrender. It showed me that letting go of something not ready to happen is not a sign of weakness. It's a commitment to integrity. Because you're not here to chase every opportunity. You're here to become the kind of person who recognizes what's real when it arrives. That requires patience, presence, and an unwillingness to panic in the quiet spaces of not yet. When you stop forcing your timeline, life begins to show you a different rhythm. You begin to make peace with waiting, not as a punishment, but as preparation. You start to feel more grounded, less desperate. You begin to realize that maybe the universe hasn't said no to you. Maybe it's just that the pieces have not been rearranged yet. If you're in a season of delay right now, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means something in you is still forming. Maybe your readiness is not about skill, but about strength. Not about more action, but about deeper trust. Trust that life knows something you don't. Trust that timing isn't just a matter of clocks, but of character. And trust that the person you're becoming through the waiting is exactly who you need to be when the moment finally arrives. Letting go doesn't strip you of your drive. It strips you of your anxiety. It brings you back to now, to the only moment that ever truly belongs to you. And in that moment, you're no longer behind. You're not early. You're not late. You are simply where you are meant to be. And sometimes that's the most powerful place of all. 3. Surrender turns desperation into magnetism. Desperation is loud. It clings, it grasps, it makes requests sound like demands, and ambition feels like a need. It creates a tension that others can sense before a word is spoken. And it drives us to chase what we could attract, if only we weren't so busy proving we deserve it. Desperation says, I must have this to be whole. But surrender says, I already am. And in that shift, from craving to clarity, from needing to choosing, something deep inside us changes. The moment you stop trying to convince life to love you, life begins to turn its face toward you. There's a quiet power in the energy of someone who doesn't need the room, but still commands it. Not because they're trying to dominate it, but because they're not trying at all. They're simply there, calm, present, at peace with who they are, and unattached to how others perceive it. This is not apathy. This is emotional freedom, a release from the prison of approval, a release from the exhausting need to be chosen. When you stop begging the world to say yes to you, you start saying yes to yourself, and that's when the world begins to notice. Surrender doesn't make you small, it makes you still. And in that stillness, your value becomes undeniable. Not because you shouted, but because you stopped whispering apologies. You become magnetic because you're not searching for anything outside yourself to prove your worth. You're not selling, you're not chasing, you're not shrinking into someone else's expectations. You're simply aligned with who you are, with where you are, with what matters now. That alignment, invisible to the eye, radiates through every movement, every word, every silence. That's magnetism. And it begins the moment you stop trying to be impressive and start being real. In Stoic philosophy, we are reminded to return to the self, to what we can truly govern. And our internal state is the first and last place of power. When you act from desperation, you abandon your center. You give your peace to outcomes. You trade your stability for speculation. But when you surrender, you return. You stand rooted. You no longer need the result to validate your effort. No longer let the reaction of others determine your worth. You become unshakable, not because you are detached from life, but because you are grounded in it. The power of letting go isn't just about inner peace, it changes your energy. You become the kind of person others want to be around. Not because you're trying to win them, but because you're already whole without them. Desperation creates scarcity. Surrender creates space. And space is what allows something or someone real to enter. That includes love. That includes purpose. That includes success. But none of those things want to be held with a clenched fist. They come where they are invited, not where they are demanded. The shift is not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming intentional. About recognizing that energy doesn't lie and that people feel your presence long before they understand your words. When you're desperate, even your kindness feels heavy. Even your silence feels anxious. But when you surrender, even your stillness speaks. It speaks of calm, of quiet self-belief, of someone who has nothing to prove and yet still stands tall. You don't become magnetic by needing more. You become magnetic by needing less, by removing the noise, the urgency, the obsession, by showing up without the mask of performance, without the weight of over-explanation, just presence, just clarity, just truth. The world doesn't need more people trying to be everything. It needs more people who are fully themselves and unafraid of what that means. This is where the Stoic calm becomes visible, not in what you avoid, but in how you hold yourself when no one is clapping, when things are quiet, when life is uncertain. You hold your center, you hold your breath, you hold your peace. That's what draws people in. Not the story of success, but the energy of someone who doesn't need it to feel whole. The paradox is simple. When you don't need it, you begin to embody it. And when you embody it, it starts to find you. If you've been chasing something and it keeps running, maybe it's not that you're too far behind. It's that you're running with the wrong energy. Stop, breathe, stand still. Let it come to you. Not because you're entitled to it, but because you're finally ready to receive it without fear, without force, without losing yourself in the process. You are not meant to beg for what you were born to attract. So stop apologizing for wanting peace. Stop explaining your worth. Stop asking the world to choose you. Choose for yourself, quietly, fully, without needing applause. That's when everything started to change. Not because you shouted louder, but because your silence finally said something worth hearing. 4. Surrender doesn't stop the work. It changes the energy. Surrender isn't the end of discipline. It's the beginning of a different kind of power. One that doesn't exhaust itself trying to control the uncontrollable, but moves from clarity, not chaos. In a world addicted to pressure, we've been taught that working harder means pushing harder, that if we don't grind, we don't grow. But there's a fine line between persistence and resistance, and the energy behind your action is what determines whether it flows or fractures. You don't need to stop doing the work. You need to change the way you hold it. There's a difference between acting from peace and acting from panic. And most of us don't notice the shift until we've already crossed it. We start a project with presence, love, with purpose. Then, somewhere along the way, that presence fades and pressure takes its place. What was once an intention becomes an obligation. What was once a gift becomes a burden. Not because the task changed, but because the energy did. And energy, even when unseen, is always felt. I am thinking about a small gym in Austin. A local trainer named Chris ran it. Quiet guy, mid-40s, the kind who speaks little but listens deeply. When I first met him, he told me he used to run 10 sessions a day, no breaks. Always pushing his clients, always tracking numbers, always chasing the next metric. The business grew, but something inside him didn't. He was tired, frustrated, and close to burning out. He'd turned something he loved into something he resented. Not because the work was wrong, but because his energy had shifted from connection to control. Then something changed. He cut his sessions down, he stopped selling results, he started focusing on conversations, presence. He brought stillness into the room. He told me once, I stopped trying to fix people. I just started being there with them. Clients still came, but they didn't come for transformation. They came for alignment. And ironically, that's when the real results began. Not because the program changed, but because the presence behind the program did. That's the quiet revolution of surrender. It doesn't cancel effort, it transforms it. In Stoic thought, what you do matters, but why you do it matters more. The intention is everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote about performing every act as if it were your last, not in panic, but in presence. The goal is not to rush, not to achieve, but to act from your highest clarity. When you work from force, you create resistance around you and within you. But when your actions are born from surrender, not passivity, but acceptance, you create ease. You become more effective, not less. More consistent, not frantic. More stable, not stubborn. Surrender means showing up without needing the world to respond a certain way. It means doing the work because the work matters, not because the world owes you applause. You no longer demand success as payment. You offer effort as devotion. That shift changes everything. The outcome may still matter, but it no longer defines you. That's when work becomes an offering, not a negotiation. Chris didn't stop coaching. He didn't stop serving. He stopped attaching his worth to the outcome. And in doing so, he found freedom not from work, but through it. That's the paradox of surrender. It softens the edges of effort and makes you sharper, not weaker. It gives you stamina without stress, clarity without control, purpose without panic. That's not laziness, that's wisdom. And in a world built on force, wisdom stands out. So many people confuse surrender with passivity, as if letting go of control means letting go of responsibility. But nothing could be further from the Stoic truth. True responsibility begins when you stop micromanaging outcomes and start mastering your response. The Stoic doesn't abandon the world. He engages it fully, but from a place of inner stillness, not external noise. He knows that calm effort is more powerful than frantic striving, and that the right energy creates the right result, not always immediately, but inevitably. If your work is draining you, maybe it's not the task. Maybe it's the energy you've wrapped around it, the need to prove, the urgency to achieve, the fear of failing. Strip those away, and what's left is pure, steady, quietly powerful. That's where Stoic action lives, not in volume, but in depth, not in pressure, but in presence. Surrender doesn't ask you to stop moving. It asks you to stop forcing, to stop making every effort a test of your worth, to stop turning every step into a demand for validation. And when you do, you'll find that your work doesn't lose its power. It gains a pulse. It starts to breathe again. So do you. And when you work from that space, unattached, unburdened, unwavering, you begin to create results not because you chase them, but because your energy invites them. That's the quiet discipline of surrender. And it changes everything. 5. Control is an illusion that drains your power. Control feels like safety. It gives us the illusion that if we manage every variable, predict every outcome, and protect every angle, we'll finally feel secure. But the truth is simpler and heavier. The more we try to control, the more we suffer. Because control isn't clarity. It's fear wearing discipline as a disguise. And the deeper we fall into the illusion, the further we drift from peace. Control promises certainty, but delivers exhaustion. It tempts us with order and then traps us in overthinking. And slowly, almost quietly, it steals the very thing it claimed to offer: freedom. You don't need to hold every piece in place. You don't need to fix every situation before you breathe again. And you don't need to grip the wheel of life so tightly that you forget the road under your feet. When we try to manage everything, we end up connecting to nothing. We lose the ability to respond wisely because we're too busy reacting to what we cannot change. The mind becomes scattered, the heart becomes restless, and the soul becomes tired. Not because life is too much, but because we're trying to carry what was never ours to hold. The Stoics knew this. They didn't waste energy trying to control the storm. They focused on steering their ship through it. You don't command the wind, but you do command the sail. You don't direct the current, but you do choose where to place your oar. When you forget this, anxiety rushes in. Because anxiety always feeds on the need to control what you can't. But peace, real peace, begins when you remember that your power is not in dictating outcomes, it's in choosing how you meet them. We mistake vigilance for strength, but it's not strength to panic every time life moves without your permission. It's not strength to fight every unknown, to chase every answer, to plan every step so tightly that there's no room left for life to breathe. True strength is calm. True strength is quiet. It doesn't need to grip. It knows when to hold, and more importantly, when to release. That's not surrendering out of defeat. That's surrender born from clarity, from knowing that not everything is yours to manage, and that not everything must make sense at the moment. Control creates tension. It tightens the breath, sharpens the nerves, and clouds the mind. It places your worth in the outcome instead of the effort. It convinces you that if life doesn't move according to plan, something's wrong with you. But life isn't a formula. It doesn't reward control. It responds to alignment. Alignment begins the moment you stop demanding and start allowing. That doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you act from presence, not panic. From strength, not scarcity. If you're tired, it might not be because you're weak. It might be because you're trying to hold on to things that were never meant to be held. Let go of the future. Let go of the story in your head that says, it must go this way or I've failed. Let go of the version of you that is only okay if everything is under control. That version is fragile. That version lives in fear. The real you, the grounded one, the resilient one, the one who breathes even when things fall apart, that version is waiting underneath the noise. The Stoic doesn't run from chaos. He walks into it with stillness. Not because he enjoys discomfort, but because he knows the only thing worse than uncertainty is abandoning your own peace in the face of it. He understands that control is not the goal. Clarity is. And clarity comes not from dominating the world, but from mastering the self. From standing in the storm and saying, I may not change this, but I will not let it change me. You don't need to see the whole path to take the next step. You don't need every answer to be grounded in the present. Let the unknown be unknown. Let life move as it does. And instead of chasing control, chase presence. Chase peace. Not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that stands when circumstances shift. That's the peace of a person who's no longer afraid to release the illusion, because he knows where his power actually lies. And if today feels heavy, if your mind is racing to solve what cannot be solved right now, pause. Come back to your breath. Come back to what is real. You don't need to command the river. You only need to guide your oar. You only need to stay steady in your center. That's what Stoicism calls you back to. The quiet confidence of knowing that while the world may shift around you, your response is still yours to choose. That's not a weakness. That's power. The kind that doesn't need to be controlled in order to endure. 6. Presence is the gateway to peace. You don't need to untangle everything at once. You don't need to solve every problem in your life tonight. What you need is presence. Quiet, grounded, honest presence. Not just to what's happening around you, but to what's happening within. Because peace doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from stopping long enough to feel where you are. And that's where most of us forget to begin. We live in a loop, regretting the past, projecting the future, rarely standing still long enough to meet the present. But the present is the only place you can ever find peace, because it's the only place where life is real. Your mind will tell you that everything must be resolved before you can rest. You need more answers, more plans, more certainty. But that voice isn't your wisdom, it's your fear. It's the noise that keeps you running even when your legs are trembling. It's the tension that wakes you at night, whispering that you're behind. And it's the weight you carry every time you try to outrun your own discomfort. But the truth is, nothing needs to be perfect for you to breathe. Nothing needs to be fixed for you to be present. You just need to stop long enough to remember that the now is enough. Presence is not passive, it is fierce. It takes courage to stop chasing. It takes strength to be still. It takes faith to sit with your thoughts without needing to escape them. Most people confuse peace with comfort, but peace doesn't always feel good. Sometimes peace is found in the middle of chaos when you realize you don't need to control it. When you stop demanding that life soften for you, you learn to soften within it. That's presence, and it's the beginning of a different kind of power. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to return to the present moment over and over again, not because it was always pleasant, but because it was always real. He knew that the future is imagination, the past is memory, and the present is the only place you can act with clarity. When you are fully here, not dwelling, not escaping, you regain your power. You stop feeding fear. You stop leaking energy into things you cannot change. And in that stillness, you become grounded again. If you've ever found yourself spiraling in worry, you know how easily the mind can run ahead of the moment. We play out scenarios that haven't happened. We rehearse conversations that may never come. And all the while, life is unfolding in front of us, quietly, patiently, offering us peace we never reach because we're never really here. But the way back isn't complicated. You don't need a perfect meditation. You don't need hours of silence. You just need one breath that you actually feel. One moment that you don't rush. One pause where you drop the storyline and return to the body. From there, everything changes. Not because your problems disappear, but because you are no longer drowning in the noise around them. You're observing, not reacting. Grounded, not grasping. This is where you reclaim the ability to respond wisely, to choose your next action from stillness, not stress. And that's how presence becomes your anchor, not by erasing difficulty, but by allowing you to meet it with steadiness. You can't always make the world quiet, but you can find quiet within yourself. You can't always fix what's broken right now, but you can stop making your brokenness your identity. You can't speed up time or skip the waiting, but you can fill this moment with awareness instead of anxiety. That's real freedom. That's what the noise in your life has been distracting you from. And when you realize that, you begin to see peace, not as a destination, but as a discipline. So if your life feels tangled right now, don't pull harder. Don't force clarity where there's only confusion. Just breathe. Just feel your feet on the ground. Just notice the air in the room. You don't need to fix everything to feel peace. You just need to stop running from what's here, because what's here is already enough for the next step. And that step, when taken with presence, always leads you closer to the life you've been trying to chase. Presence is not a luxury. It is your lifeline. And the more you return to it, not in theory, but in practice, the more you'll realize that peace was never far away. It was only waiting for you to come home. 7. Resistance is often fear of wearing a disguise. Sometimes what we call laziness, procrastination, or lack of motivation isn't a flaw in discipline. It's resistance. Often that resistance doesn't come from being weak. It comes from being misaligned. It shows up when you're moving in a direction that doesn't belong to you, when you're trying to become someone you never chose to be. And that pressure, that tight, heavy feeling in your chest, it isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a signal, a quiet voice inside whispering, "This isn't your path." We often resist not because we're afraid of effort, but because we're afraid that all the effort is going toward the wrong thing. There's a deep fatigue that comes from pretending, from living inside a version of yourself that was crafted to please others, meet expectations, or fit into a frame that was never built for your soul. You can wear that image for a while. You can call it discipline. You can convince the world, but your body knows, your mind knows. Eventually, the weight of resistance will ask to be heard. My younger brother once studied medicine, not because he wanted to, but because it made sense. It made our parents proud. It looked good on paper. For years, he pushed himself, through textbooks, through internships, through long, sleepless nights. And he was good at it, but he was never alive in it. His eyes were never in it. His voice dimmed over time, until one day he stopped pretending. He left med school. He picked up a sketchbook. Today, he designs architecture that moves people, not because it's easy, but because it's his. He told me once, "I didn't hate medicine. I just wasn't supposed to give my life to something that never made me feel like myself." That kind of shift doesn't come from giving up. It comes from waking up. Waking up to the truth that resistance isn't always something to fight. It's something to listen to. And when it speaks, you don't silence it. You lean in. You ask, what am I trying to protect? Whose voice am I trying to please? What version of me am I still trying to hold together just to feel enough? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're the beginning of peace. Because clarity doesn't come from pushing through what you secretly dread. It comes from releasing what no longer belongs. Stoicism doesn't tell you to ignore resistance. It teaches you to question it, to examine what you fear, what you cling to, and what you truly control. If your actions are fueled by fear of judgment, they're not free. If your dreams are shaped by someone else's validation, they're not yours. Epictetus said that freedom begins the moment you no longer need to seek it outside yourself. Maybe that's why so many of us feel tired. We've confused productivity with purpose. We've mistaken approval for alignment. But here's the quiet truth. Resistance fades when you return to what is real. When you stop moving from expectation and start living from essence. When you choose work that lights you up rather than dims you down. And you don't need to burn everything to the ground to begin. You just need to take one step back, one breath deeper, one act truer. That's surrender. That's freedom. Not from effort, but from false effort. From trying to be what you were never meant to become. And if you feel stuck today, not just physically but energetically, don't ask what's wrong with you. Ask what part of you you've been ignoring. Ask if the resistance is trying to protect something sacred. Ask if the reason you can't move forward is that you're being asked to turn inward. Not all pauses are failures. Some are invitations. Some are a quiet space in between stories, one ending, one not yet written. You are not broken for feeling resistance. You are honest. You are awake. You are at a threshold. The path ahead doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be present, to be real, to be willing to let go of the story that no longer holds your truth. The moment you stop forcing yourself to be someone else, the weight begins to lift. The fog begins to clear, and your strength returns, not from effort, but from alignment. That's the Stoic way. Not to suppress what you feel, but to examine it with calm eyes and a steady heart. To ask the harder questions with soft hands, and to move forward not because you were told to, but because it feels like home. So if something inside you keeps hesitating, don't be ashamed of it. Ask it. Listen. It might just be the wisest part of you, the part that refuses to betray itself any longer. And when you finally stop resisting that voice, you'll find that surrender doesn't silence your strength. It awakens it. 8. Letting go doesn't kill ambition, it grounds it. Letting go isn't the enemy of ambition. It's the foundation of a stronger, steadier pursuit. The kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, the kind that lasts. In a world that confuses urgency with purpose, we're told that to succeed we must be relentless. Always reaching, always proving, always more. But ambition built on anxiety is not ambition, it's fear in disguise. It burns fast, it burns bright, and then it burns you out. Letting go doesn't mean you stop wanting. It means you stop needing to suffer to prove you deserve it. When you loosen your grip, your goals don't vanish, they become clearer. You're no longer chasing to escape yourself. You're choosing to grow because it's true to who you are. The difference may be invisible to others, but internally, it's everything. The energy shifts, the pressure lifts, and your steps start to come from alignment, not adrenaline. That's where ambition becomes something deeper. Not a desperate need to arrive, but a quiet devotion to keep walking. Stoic wisdom was never about shrinking from greatness, it was about anchoring it. Seneca wrote not to avoid striving, but to strive from virtue, not vanity. And this is where surrender shows its power. Not in killing the dream, but in calming the storm around it. When your identity is not tied to the outcome, you become free to give your best without fearing what happens next. You stop measuring your worth by how fast things grow. You start paying attention to whether they're growing in the right direction. Letting go is not apathy, it's precision. It cuts through the noise. It asks you to stop scattering your energy chasing approval and instead plant it in something real, something steady. You still want to build, to create, to serve, but you don't do it with your fists clenched. You do it with your eyes open. You do it from presence, not panic, from intention, not ego. You don't need to abandon drive, but you do need to question what's driving you. Is it curiosity or fear? Is it vision or comparison? Are you creating because you're called to or because you're scared to fall behind? These questions matter. Misaligned ambition feels like running with a weight strapped to your chest. But grounded ambition, the kind that comes from surrender, feels like breath, like clarity, like power that doesn't scream but moves quietly and surely toward what matters. So many people confuse letting go with giving up. But giving up is collapse. Letting go is a choice. It's deciding not to force what doesn't fit. It's knowing when to pause, when to recenter. Remember that your timeline is not supposed to look like anyone else's, that growth is not always loud, and that arriving somewhere slowly, in alignment, is better than arriving quickly, in pieces. Ambition grounded in surrender becomes resilient. It can weather the delays, the silence, the setbacks, because it's not built on fragile validation. It's not shaken by every no, every change in the wind, because it wasn't chasing applause. It was following something deeper, something that doesn't vanish when results are slow, something that doesn't collapse when plans fall apart, something real. And that's the paradox most never learn. When you stop needing your dreams to complete you, you actually get closer to fulfilling them. Because you've removed the desperation, you've removed the noise. You're no longer pushing the river, you're walking beside it, moving in rhythm with something larger than you need to arrive. This is where stoicism meets surrender, not as passivity, but as a profound kind of power, the kind that stays rooted, that doesn't fight the timing of life but works with it, that doesn't rush the harvest but shows up each day to plant. Because ambition that's not rooted becomes an obsession. An obsession eventually becomes exhaustion. But when you let go, when you release the timeline, the perfectionism, the pressure, you don't lose your fire. You direct it. Let your dream be strong. Let it stretch you. Let it challenge what you think is possible. But don't let it choke your spirit. Don't let it become another version of self-punishment. You don't need to prove you're worthy of what you love. You only need to show up for it, with honesty, with presence, and with the willingness to let it unfold on its own terms. That's the kind of ambition that lasts, not the kind that burns for a season, but the kind that becomes a way of life. Quiet, focused, devoted, and deeply free. In a world obsessed with outcomes, surrender feels counterintuitive. Yet, as we've seen through each part of this journey, the quiet act of letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It's not about abandoning your goals, but about releasing the grip of control, fear, and false timelines that keep you from living fully right now. When you stop forcing outcomes and start trusting the process, life begins to respond in unexpected, powerful ways. You move from desperation to magnetism, from chaos to calm, from resistance to deep emotional clarity. Surrender is not a one-time revelation, it's a daily discipline. You practice it when you stop measuring your worth by how fast things happen. You strengthen it when you choose presence over panic, and you embody it when you hold your ambition with steadiness, not strain. Letting go doesn't mean losing your fire. It means grounding your energy so your light can burn longer, truer, and with more peace at the core. If you take just one thing with you, let it be this: you don't have to control everything to move forward. You only need to show up, gently, honestly, fully. Practice that today, not someday. Start now. In the quiet moment between your next thought, your next decision, your next breath, pause. Ask yourself, am I acting from fear or from alignment? Let that question guide you back to yourself. And as you do, share your story. In the comments below, tell us where you are learning to let go and where you're finding strength and surrender. Your voice may be the reminder someone else needs to hear, that they're not alone. This path, though quiet, is filled with power, and it begins, always, with a single choice: to trust.